you see, so these resources, whether it is renewable resources, whether it is coal or whether it is kind of water or so many other things are there. So normally when we talk about natural resources, we talk about those resources which are occurring naturally in the environment. So it might be forest, it might be water, it might be land, it might be wasteland. Okay, it might be biodiversity. So many things are there. So the issue is we have already tried to find out that in the first unit we found that environmental resources can be used by mankind for different activities. Okay, direct use are there, indirect use will also be there. And so far as direct use is concerned, we are trying to extract raw materials as well as the energy resources from the environment. So raw materials in different forms, whether it might be metal, it might be non-metals, it might be something else, forest products, or so many other things. Some of the products are directly utilized, as has been pointed out. Some others may not be directly used, but at the same time, they will be providing us a lot of kind of benefits. We talk about this biodiversity, which is actually controlling the environment as such. So, kind of many very important things like water cycle, air cycle, all those things we have already studied in Unit 1. So some of the things will be directly visible, some of the things will not be visible. But the fact is that they'll be providing innumerable benefits to the mankind. Okay. Now, at the same time, we have also come across the fact that environmental resources are not unlimited in nature. So they are also scarce commodities. So since they are scarce commodities, you cannot use it for meeting every requirement of the mankind. So obviously there is a question of choice. There is a question of prioritization of our needs. So that gives a scope for economics to come into play a role in natural resources. So here economics, so when we talk about economics of natural resources, we try to find out how best we can make use of these scarce resources in pursuit of our maximization of welfare. Basically, it means how best we should make use of the natural resources, whether it is renewable resources or whether it is non-renewable resources, so that we can use these resources efficiently. We can try to get the maximum out of this without making anybody worse off. We can have our maximization of own individual welfare or societal welfare. In a sense, we can say that we try to go for efficient allocation of resources, where this efficiency is nothing but allocative efficiency, or we can say that this is Pareto efficiency. Am I making myself clear to you? Is there any issue out here? Can you get the point?
Yes, sir.
Now, in the case of natural resources, as we have seen, so there are different items. So some of them are kind of available abundantly in a sense, but even then, some of the characteristics make them a little bit scarce. So we talk about renewable resources, we talk about non-renewable resources, and this is the basic distinction or classification in natural resources. We'll go to that. But mostly when you talk about renewable resources, we try to understand the fact that some of the resources, natural resources, can augment its life or maybe augment its kind of a reserve by natural replenishment, which is actually the time period is meaningful to us or mankind. Okay, within a reasonable time frame, they can replenish themselves. So that is why they are renewable resources. We talk about water, we talk about forest, we talk about fishery. So all those things can multiply or maybe kind of regenerate themselves. So it's within a specific time period. But in so far as non-renewable resources are concerned, for example, we talk about this fossil fuels. Okay, so petroleum products, coal, and all these materials or metals which are available in the environment. So for them, this natural replenishment loop may not be so meaningful or significant for a kind of time period of the mankind. Because what happens, it takes a lot of time, years and years, centuries together to have this type of natural resources. So regeneration, although it might be happening over a period of time, so that might take centuries together to have kind of meaningful use of these resources. So within a kind of specific time span, so there may not be augmentation of the stock of these type of natural resources. So that is why, so these are non-renewable resources. It doesn't mean that they will not be renewed. They might be renewed, but it will take centuries together for having a stock which will be meaningful for us. So that is why they are considered to be non-renewable resources. So this is the definition that we talk about in case of the renewable, non-renewable resources. Okay, so let's do it. Yeah, it cannot be reconstituted into their original form after use, and it becomes waste once it is being used. So sometimes we, by recycling, we can make use of the resource once more, but otherwise it might convert itself into a waste. So this is a definition of renewable resources. They can be replenished after use and can be sustained if natural flow of the resources is maintained. So to have some more idea about this different types of resources, you can go to the resource taxonomy, which actually tries to define the resources, natural resources into three basic categories. So they are in the form of current reserves, potential reserves, and resource endowment. And this is directly taken from the definition given by the US Geological Survey. So they have done it on the basis of two parameters. One is the economic parameter and the other one is the geological parameter. Now, when you talk about the natural resources, since it occurs in the nature, then some of them might be available in different kind of, what will you say, depth of the nature. It might be beneath the sea. It might be actually deep inside the earth's, kind of earth's crust, something like that. So all those things are there. So we need to find out the kind of, some of them can be easily extracted, some of them cannot be easily extracted. Some of them will be available at the given price. Some of them may not be available as such, but provided technology is available and the more price is actually possible, people are willing to pay higher price. So in those cases, probably technology can be made use of to extract resources from, okay, kind of deeper aquifer kind of a thing. So in that case also we can say that resource reserves will be there. So in this way we can define these different types of resource of the natural resource with reference to the natural resources. So we can have a categorization based on geological dimension as well as economic dimension. So here in this case, we find a number of things out there. So if we move from left to right, so that will give you kind of relatively more or higher geological uncertainty. So basically, this row things will give us geological dimension insofar as the resources are concerned. When you say reserves, actually, so it might be current reserves, so which might be available at the price, given price. So that will be expressed in terms of a expressed in the form of a number, maybe how many quintals, how many metric ton, how many million tons. So these things will be expressed in terms of certain number. Now, if we go from top to bottom, top to down, so that basically tells you that the first things will be relatively more easily available. Whereas if we go a little bit down, so the things or resources will be very difficult to extract. So more we go down on these diagrams, we find resources to be increasingly difficult for extraction from the Earth's aquifer. So we have three basic differences. In essence, we have this current reserves. So current reserves, as has been shown in the diagram, it's the shaded area in the figure. So which are defined as known resources. These are known actually. These are identified. People know that these are the amounts. For example, forest resources. Or maybe we can talk about how much of coal reserve is there in a particular colliery or maybe in a particular location. So how much of petroleum reserve is there? That reserve actually, which can be meaningfully exploited at a particular price, or maybe at a given price, at current price. So these things will represent the current reserves. Okay, so the forest, the fishery, coal, petroleum product, whatever that may be. So if we know the exact amount or the amount which can be extracted at the current prices, so these are known as current reserves, and these current reserves can be expressed in terms of certain numbers. But against this, as I told you, that it's a kind of, it's not a matter of only kind of economic thing, but also a geological thing. In certain circumstances, given the technology, the people might be in a position to extract the resources from deep aquifer, maybe from the top of the mountain also. But for that, additional efforts will be required. Additional expenses have to be undertaken by the extractor. So in essence, what we can say is that although some of the reserves may not be immediately available at the current price, but given the fact that people are willing to pay higher amount, so better technology might be applied and resources can be extracted. If that is the case, we can find out another form of, or another kind of type of reserves, which is known as potential reserves. And these potential reserves will not be exactly expressible in terms of number. So this will depend upon the amount of price that people are going to pay. So in a sense, what we can see, the higher the price people are willing to pay, higher will be the potential reserve. In that sense, we can see that may not be in a position to express potential reserves in terms of a number. We can express potential reserve as a function of price. Okay. So this shows actually, so different terms are being used: identified, undiscovered, demonstrated, measured, indicated, hypothetical, speculative, then economic, sub-economic. So where you have another two categories: submarginal, paramarginal. So these are the categorization of different natural resources. Another concept which is used in case of natural resources is the resource endowment. In case of resource endowment, we basically say, so we basically try to find out how much maximum, okay, so of the natural resources are available in the Earth's crust, and this is independent of the price. Okay, in essence, what we can say is that that is the maximum or upper limit of the resources that might be available in the environment. So this will be more of a geological rather than economic concept. You may not be in a position to extract them economically. So you might be in a position to extract it given enormous price that you have to pay. But economically, that will not be useful to extract those resources. But anyhow, this will give you some idea about the kind of availability of terrestrial resources in the Earth's crust. So that is a kind of, we can say that that much is available. In a sense, in economics, we talk about production possibility frontier, so beyond which you cannot go. So here also, when we talk about resource endowment probably is representing the maximum amount which might be available in the Earth's crust as natural resource, right? But it may not, it may never be extracted meaningfully by with the help of given technology. So, but that represents the upper limit. So these are the definitions which is given: what identified resources are, what measured resources are, again what will be indicated resources, and what will be undiscovered, hypothetical, and speculative resources. Already the slides are made available to you. You please have a look at this. So, but of course we may not be so much interested in these things, but geologically these are some of the concepts which are being used insofar as natural resources are concerned. We have already tried to find out the categorization of the natural resources into non-renewable and renewable resources. When you say non-renewable, so these are the resources which are also depletable. Now, these depletable resources will be the one for which natural replenishment feedback loop can be safely ignored, because this is not very meaningful from the point of view of mankind. Okay, so it's replenishment happens, regeneration happens, but the fact is that the replenishment rate of these resources is very low. It is so low that it doesn't offer a potential for augmenting the stock in any reasonable time frame. You see, you know about the life span of human, one generation, two generation, or three generation. Okay, so but within these 2-3 generation, it's not possible to have kind of addition to the stock of natural resources, I mean to say of depletable resources or non-renewable resources. So that's why it is not so important, not so meaningful for the humankind. Now, some of the resources can be recycled. Recycle means you can make again further use the resource in some form. Okay, so this is the resource which, although currently being used for some particular purpose, exists in a form allowing its mass to be recovered. Once that purpose is no longer necessary or desirable, you can convert it into something and you can recycle it. You can actually get it used. So that is recyclable resources. Now, one thing is that the current reserves of depletable resources, recyclable resources, can be increased or augmented by economic replenishment as well as by recycling. So sometimes we can add to the stock of the natural resources by recycling process. So they can be used many times, so in different forms probably. So in that case, their lives can be enhanced. So many times price is one stimulant for economic replenishment, and sometimes it is technological progress. Now price, if the price of a product is, you know about that, no? So the law of demand is there. If the price of a product is high, the demand for the commodity will be low. Now, similarly, taking cue from this law of demand, if the price of products based on natural resources or maybe kind of the raw natural resources goes up, it becomes high, then obviously demand for these resources will be low. In that case, the life of these resources can be enhanced, so it can go up. Similarly, by way of technological progress, okay, so with technological interventions, better technology, so probably it's possible to reduce wastage of resources. So probably we can extend or enhance the life of these resources. So the stock can be augmented by way of technological progress as well as price charged for these resources. Another issue is that these potential reserves can be exhausted owing to demand for and durability of the products built with the resource. So we talk about durability of the products. If it is durable, then it will last longer. In that sense, you can say that maybe the resources can also, the life of the resources can be extended or extended. Uh, Again, if the demand for a particular product is very high, then obviously that needs to be extracted, and the resources for meeting or maybe generating that product or maybe creating that product have to be extracted from the environment. So demand will be high for those resources. There is a possibility that the resource gets exhausted too soon. Okay. Another issue is the capability of us to store a particular resource. So whether we are able to explicitly store the resource or not. For example, helium gas. So if we can store, of course, this is not feasible actually. Gaseous products you cannot store as such, but many other products you can store. So if you store a particular product, its life gets extended. So it is available for longer period of time. So our ability to store the resource also decides whether we can increase the size of the potential reserves of any depletable resource or not. So of course, we need to look into certain other things as well. All the depletable resources will not be permitting recycling or reuse. Coal, for example. So once you burn it, so it will convert itself into some form of energy, and it might be dissipated into the environment as well, which you cannot recapture and get it back and reuse or recycle it. So that's the problem. Similar thing is oil and gas, which once combusted, they turn into heat energy, which cannot be again recaptured. So that is another issue insofar as these type of resources are concerned. Even if most of them are recyclable, for example, some metals, copper, steel, iron, the theoretical upper limit on recycling is less than 100%. Some of them will be lost in the process of recycling itself. So that's why the recovering 100% of recyclable resource may not be possible. Although theoretically we can recycle everything. Insofar as renewable resources are concerned, all of us know about that. So they are differentiated from depletable resources primarily by the fact that natural replenishment augments the flow of renewable resources at a non-negligible rate. And there are so many examples. For example, we can talk about solar energy, we can talk about forest, we can talk about water, cereals, then animals, so many things are there. Fish is there. So these are some form of actually renewable resources, in which case we can renew, we can expand the stock of these resources. Of course, in some of the cases, we do not have to do anything, but in some other cases, we have to do a lot of things. In essence, we can say that the stock of these natural resources depend critically on the human intervention. But for some others, that is not so important. Human intervention means, in fact, stock of natural, some of the natural resources will be independent of human intervention. If we talk about fish, for example, or forest, we talk about deforestation. Why do we talk about deforestation? We talk about deforestation because human intervention is directly responsible for the kind of or size or stock of the resources, environmental resources or forest resources. So if we go for more extraction of forest resources, it might so happen that the stock of the forest resources goes down, and after a point of time, it will be very difficult to regenerate forest resources. So this is a kind of situation out there in case of even renewable resources. But same is the case with probably fishery. Okay, in case of fishery, if we go and catch indiscriminately, and this fish population might be affected like anything. So, and if it goes below a particular threshold limit, the regeneration rate may not be sufficiently high. So in that case, this extraction rate, if it is higher than the regeneration rate, and if the total stock is less than a particular threshold limit, so there is a possibility that the entire renewable resource gets exhausted. So that way, in fact, human intervention can directly result in a kind of change in the stock of these natural resources. But everything is not like that. For example, we talk about solar energy. Solar energy, we cannot do anything about that. Okay, so our intervention in the process of solar energy cannot actually reduce the amount of solar energy available in the earth. So this is independent of human intervention. So some renewable resources, as we have talked about, actually, we talked about storage of non-renewable or depletable resources. Similarly, some renewable resources can be stored, and hence it will provide a valuable way to manage the allocation of the resource over time. Storage of depletable resources presents a different service from storage of renewable resources. Insofar as depletable resources are concerned, storage improves their economic life. The life gets extended. But in the case of renewable resources, what happens? Over a period of time we will be requiring different amount of the resources. Now, if we can store and make it available for the future, it will help us in overcoming the cyclical fluctuations or imbalances of supply and demand by making the resource available at the time of higher demand. So that way, that will help in smoothing out the cyclical imbalances between supply and demand of the renewable resources. Okay, so that way, in fact, there are differences in management or of these two different types of natural resources. So the challenge for management of renewable resource is different from the challenge of managing depletable resources. So for depletable resources, the main issue is allocation of dwindling stock among generations. Basically, we mean to say that there will be kind of intergenerational, kind of making it available across different generations over a period of time. So the challenge is to maintain a kind of reserve for meeting the needs of different generations. So of course we know that the resource might be limited in stock. So in that case, after a point of time, probably we have to think about switching over completely from non-renewable resources to renewable resources. That way, in fact, we are thinking about doing like that. Fossil fuels, as we know, that this will not last longer. It will not be available indefinitely. So that's why we are thinking about finding out sources of renewable resources so that we can switch over to renewable resources. Already, some part insofar as electricity is concerned, actually are produced with the help of renewable resources. Although the percentage is even very small, but ultimately mankind has to take a call on continuing with dependence on non-renewable resources or dependence on renewable resources. So compared to that, the challenge for managing renewable resources involves the maintenance of an efficient, sustainable flow. Of course, in the case of renewable resources, as we know, that economic life can be extended by regeneration of the resources. The idea here is to managing the resources in such a way that the a sustainable flow of the resources maintained over a period of time. Because sometimes the demand might be high, at some point of time the demand might be relatively low. In these different fluctuating demand situations, so the target will be to make the supply available so that the demand at different points of time can be efficiently sustained or managed. So these are the challenges for management of the two different types of natural resources, one depletable resource and the other one is renewable resource. I believe this is okay with you. You can understand what we are talking about. Basically, we are talking about certain things regarding the different forms of renewable resources, management issues of these different resources, and the nature and characteristics of these resources. Right? If you have any question till this point, you can raise. Otherwise, we can go move on to the next issue. So next issue is to talk about managing the exhaustible resources. If a resource gets exhausted, then what can be done about managing these resources? How can we make the life of the resource longer, or how can we think about utilizing the resource in an efficient manner? That is the idea. What should be the efficient allocation or optimal allocation of the resource over time? Okay. So we need to find out the conditions under which a depleting exhaustible resource can be managed or utilized efficiently. Okay. So normally, when you talk about normal ordinary goods and services, okay, the supply behavior of a price-taking owner, okay, so will be a little bit different from that of an uh, exhaustible resource. Basically, what I mean to say is that in case of ordinary goods and services, or ordinary goods or resource, normal demand and supply can decide how much of the resource is to be produced in the economy. And you see, since it can be replicated, it can be reproduced using the resources which are available, so the product can be reproduced or produced. But in the case of natural resources, if these are depletable resources, that these will not be available for long. So that is why, so what should be the conditions, what should be the procedure of using these non-renewable resources in an efficient manner or optimal manner? That is the most important thing out there. In case of a price-taking farm which supplies ordinary goods, so he or she will adjust the production in different time periods. His idea is that the additional cost of production from an extra unit of output, for an extra unit of output, basically we mean to say that marginal cost of production in each period should be just equivalent to the price of the product. Now, why is it so? Is that the additional cost in the form of marginal cost, if it exceeds the price basically gives us the additional return that we'll be getting from selling the product. If the benefits, the price will be giving us the benefit. If the benefits are lesser than the additional cost that has to be borne by the producer, then obviously it will not be a prudent or rational decision. So we believe in this rationality assumption. So where the producer or consumer will always try to be more rational. So in that sense, if marginal cost is higher than price, then obviously cost is higher than the benefits. So that is not a rational decision for any producer to continue producing. So normally, the equilibrium of this farm will be attained at a point where at the most the price is just equivalent to the marginal cost of production. Okay, so in essence, the condition, necessary condition for equilibrium of this type of product will be attained when price is just equivalent to marginal cost of production, right? But the issue is when we talk about a farm which is engaged in the process of extraction of exhaustible resource. So in that case, whether this condition of price being equivalent to marginal cost will hold in the case of extraction of an exhaustible resource or not. That is one issue which we need to look into. I believe so. These type of cases will require some modifications in the standard theory. So that is already given. So if you go by the write-up which is given already in case of this natural resource economics, you will find this. So what happens in the case of exhaustible resources? The product cannot be reproduced. That is the problem. In the case of ordinary goods and services, the product can be reproduced. The demand is there. You can meet the meet the demand by providing the product by reproducing the product. But in the case of exhaustible resources, that is not possible. In this sense, what happens? We need to take a call whether the product needs to be produced or extracted today or in the future. Whether we need to keep the product in the nature or whether we want to extract the resources as of now. That is the question that the extractor or the society has to take. So in a sense, you see, so if we use the resource today, the resource will no longer be available for use in the future. Or if we do not use the resource today, so maybe the benefits that we should have got it today will not be available. That those benefits will not be available for mankind. So there is a kind of trade-off. Or in essence, what you can say, there is an opportunity cost. If you use the resource today, you are losing the opportunity of using the resource in the future. So that is a cost. If you do not extract the resource today, it will be possible for you to extract the resource in the next year or maybe in the future. So, but by extracting the resource today, we are losing the opportunity of using the resource in the future. So that means that there is an opportunity cost. Okay. In the case of ordinary goods and services, that is not the problem because scarcity issue is not that great. In the case of ordinary goods and services, you can reproduce the product whenever there is a demand. But in this situation, since the resource is not unlimited, so once you extract, that is no longer available in the environment. So because of these things, I believe this price in normal situation, in fact, this condition of price being equivalent to marginal cost, that needs to be modified a little bit to incorporate the requirements or specific characteristics of the exhaustible resources. In this case, the cost will no longer remain as only marginal cost, but we will also have kind of opportunity cost included here, because marginal cost basically represents the marginal cost of extraction or marginal cost of production. But here, apart from marginal cost of extraction of the resource, we are also losing the resource in the future. We will not be in a position to making use of the resource in the future, which is known as an opportunity cost, or maybe this is also known as the marginal user cost. So, insofar as the exhaustible resources are concerned, the concept of user cost is very important, or marginal cost is very important. It's not valid in the case of reproducible goods and services, because an amount which is consumed today will not reduce the amount available in the future. Additional quantities can always be produced in the case of reproducible goods and services. But if we use a barrel of oil today, extract it today, then it is not available for extraction in the future. So that is why this marginal cost that we are talking about, this marginal cost doesn't represent actual marginal cost insofar as this exhaustible resources are concerned. So that's why this marginal cost is augmented by including the user cost with it. So when we include the user cost in the marginal cost, we find this augmented marginal cost, which is nothing but the marginal cost plus user cost. So in that case, if we define marginal cost like that, then
Hello,
yes,
sir. Are you presenting something?
no, I'm not presenting. I'm
Okay, okay.
just explaining it. So probably you can refer to you this article that I gave you, or probably let me display the article which will tell you. Just give me a minute. Just a minute. Let me see. Can you see this right up?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm saying is this one. This part. Basically, this one. P is equal to MC plus UC. So when you define marginal cost to be comprising of both the marginal cost of production as well as user cost, then we get this augmented marginal cost. So in a sense, for optimal allocation or maybe extraction of this type of exhaustible resource, normally in case of ordinary goods and services, we say that equilibrium is attained at a point where price is just equivalent to marginal cost. Now that marginal cost is marginal cost of production. Here, the optimal condition for equilibrium for using exhaustible resources will be accordingly modified. It will include marginal cost will include actually both marginal cost of extraction as well as opportunity cost or user cost. So if we add both these together, so we get the augmented marginal cost. Now here, in the case of exhaustible resources, the price will be adjusted to the augmented marginal cost, which is nothing but marginal cost plus user cost. If we do like that, you can have a look at the diagram. There is a diagram. So you will find like this. There is a demand function, which is given as P is equal to Py, which basically means the quantity and price are interlinked. In essence, actually, Y and price. So that will be having a negative relationship. At higher price, quantity demanded will be lesser. Or in essence, you can say at higher quantity, the price will be less, something like this. Now, marginal cost of extraction, if we assume it to be constant, so that will be a straight line which is parallel to the x-axis where quantity is measured. On the y-axis, we measure the price. So price or demand curve and the marginal cost, they interact at a point which is given, which is actually deciding on a quantity level given by y double star, right? But if we take into account not only the marginal cost, but also the user cost. So in that case, this marginal cost, augmented marginal cost will be different. And we assume that the augmented marginal cost will be represented by a y star. In that case, the amount which will be produced or maybe extracted will be given by o y star. So o y star is less than o y double star. So that means when we have this marginal user cost in place, we are taking into account the scarcity of the resource. If we are taking into account the scarcity of the resource, probably the amount which will be optimally extracted in a particular time period, will be lesser than when we do not consider this uh, marginal user cost or maybe opportunity cost. In case of ordinary goods and services, Y double star will be the amount which will be produced or maybe which will be made available. But in the case of exhaustible resources, when you take into account this marginal user cost, then augmented marginal cost will be given by A Y star. So in that case, the amount of extraction of the resource will be much lesser, and that will be Y star. So this way, in fact, by making use of the concept of opportunity cost, so we can modify the condition for optimal allocation of exhaustible resources or efficient allocation of exhaustible resources. Of course, we can extend it a little bit further. If you have any query till this point, we can take up. The rest of the things I can take up tomorrow, because that will require a little bit of deduction as well, which I'll try to have it based on this article. Any question till this point? And this is known as, this P is equal to MC plus UC is known as the first condition of optimal depletion, or in a sense you can say this is the first condition of optimal extraction of exhaustible resource. If you have any question, I can take up.